I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched, you have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule. What makes our boards unique are they are built right here in York. They're built using material that grows right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers. There's a lot of time that goes into these boards, between 40 and 60 hours start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far one of my top favorite parts. It's just you and a shaping stand, a board, and a hand plane. Everything else is out of your view. It's simple, it's pleasurable, it's quiet. You can be with your thoughts and you can just kind of be present. There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind. Once we've shaped it down and the board's looking like it's supposed to look like, it's time for it to go into the glassing room. 4-ounce fiberglass, laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board. Once both sides are lamb coated, it's time to put in the hardware. Drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leash plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, back into the glassing room, we brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy, shiny, and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. Put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of work and the amount of passion that went into the board. So I'm not really looking at hours and efficiency. We're looking at like doing it right and enjoying it as we go.
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 Grand Marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still a social taboo. The CEO of a Beijing-based internet company is on a mission to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blued is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blued is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blued, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blued in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blued means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，Blue能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同志互联网公司。
This is Rich Chigga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of predominantly Asian artists, really making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but for what was the question?
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of my own kind of private office, basically. To be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would take pisses here, you know what I mean? It was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy, and just the shit that he was saying, the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't, and he came up with that stick 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living, and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute, bro.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it, but the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just everything about it, man. Just it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chigga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chigga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I did the sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chigga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything the rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. It's just more entertaining. We just edit it as tight as possible, put it up, and it really worked.
12 in the morning, pop shells, still living in.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on, a Reebok pouch.
This is the hardest nigga of all time.
You said when you come for a chigga like me, that was dope.
Like, it's just lit, and I think people will take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well, and one day it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it. Like, who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up. I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it. Like, next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and, what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this,
It's just Taco Bell. What could possibly go wrong?
to creating something Tonight, Rich Chigga has a show in New York City. Tickets sold out in an hour.
I came here, I'm first online. I
was here at 1.
Yeah, I was the third person online.
So why'd you get here so early?
Because I want to see Rich Chigga.
I want to touch him.
What do you guys think of Joji?
He's That's my dad, son.
You guys copped the new EP or like?
Yeah. I woke up at 6 in the morning just to copy that shit. And then I listened to it, and that shit started making me cry.
This is actually kind of exciting. Every time, this never gets old. Like, you live online and social media, but like, there's nothing like just being with the people.
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But Idiot Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for Idiot's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.
Online retailer Farfetch is betting it can shape the future. This is its concept store, showcasing the latest in retail tech.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers' touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the Connected Rail. And this is using a combination of RFID and ultrasound. The RFID signal recognizes the product, and the ultrasound recognizes the movement. Take the product off, and then you'll start to see your products appear. And essentially, it's like online browsing behavior. Whichever products you touch and pick up in the store are automatically sent to your app. This is effectively what you've created is your in-store wish list. In the middle, you'll see essentially a hologram of the product. What the customer sees, they control the experience on a touch device. What this allows the customer to do is take elements of products and then add their own style to it. Right, so this is the connected mirror. So in this example, I see my products. I select a coat, and that's tried it, and it's slightly too big for me. So what I can do is choose an alternative size and send a request to the sales associate, and they'll bring that size to me in the fitting room mirror. You'll also see that we've got some product recommendations here. Crucially, the sales associate's able to push items into the mirror from their device. If you wanted to, you could simply use the mirror and pay and go. Your items would then be packed and dispatched to you afterwards.
Do you want me to turn you so you're looking outwards? Yes, please. How about there? First time we came out with B, Jade said, "It feels like I've been released from prison." Do you want these, Mrs.?
Definitely.
Definitely. Right.
Yeah.
And she could say hello to everybody, people she hadn't seen for months.
It's
Hi, it's
Jade.
Jade.
Oh. So you can talk to Jade through this.
Hi, Katie. She's there.
Hi.
Every time anyone's seen her, they want to know why she's there. And it's kind of the opposite of when you're in a wheelchair and people see you and they kind of go, oh, should I look? I don't know what the right protocol is. When there's a tiny robot with its bright little eyes going around just looking happy everywhere, it really opens you up for conversation.
We've got some friends here, look.
Hiya! When I saw her for the first time, I remember thinking, this is going to change things. This is one of those points where if this was a book, this would be the cliffhanger. condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that I have a lot of dislocations, there's a lot of pain, and a lot of seizures and whatnot. So I can end up on my own in my room for long periods of time. A lot of the time, with a condition like my own, of course there's the pain, and the pain is bad, and the dislocations are bad, and the seizures and being in paralysis and never knowing whether you're going to be able to wake up properly tomorrow, that's bad. But what's worse still is being able to count the number of people you see a day on one hand.
Are you ready?
Sure am, I'm just hoping the connection's going to stay.
Yeah, me too. Alright, here we go.
When you're used to just the same little metre by metre and a half window every day, and you've been there for months, being able to just see the sky from somewhere else, or the tops of trees, or a sign, is incredible. Or being able to have that kind of chat in the car that most people will probably take for granted.
I'm going to go past Grandma and Grandad so you can give them a wave. Now, if Jade is particularly seizure-y, she can still take part. And that's brilliant, really, because before she would just be left in a bed or in the house with just her carers. It's quite a small world, that.
Right, so there's one of them. Here, this costume I'm busy making at the moment. When I'm not on bed rest and I'm not just wearing pyjamas all the time, I enjoy being able to dress as different characters and go to Comic Cons and that kind of thing, because it just lets me show a different side of myself, and it's a bit of fun. If you can't go out that often, you've got to enjoy it when you do. Was that? Good. It's one of those weird things where I want to not have to use B because I want to be well enough to be able to go to those places myself. Like, it really makes a big difference to me to be able to go into school. But the thing is, with my condition fluctuating all of the time, I can't go into school reliably. And so far it's interesting. Still a few little things that we need to work out, but for the most part I think it's going fairly well, and it's brilliant because I can really tell the difference between today and yesterday. How yesterday I forced myself to go into school when I wasn't very well and I was really tired afterwards and ended up having loads of seizures, whereas today I've been able to do all of the work. I've been able to keep a clear head and not be ill, which means I'm able to be more focused on my schoolwork.
So there is my first step of working, is to simplify root 8. The algebra test is next week.
Now I'm trying to make friendships which I'll be able to maintain with B. Before that, I end up letting people down quite often. B gives me hope, yeah. She's just always there. And if I can't do something, she can. And if I need sort of assistance to be able to make commitments, then she's there, and she means that I feel like a more valuable person because I'm more reliable.
When it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told with 5G is that for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The cubicle represents a tyranny. It confines your imagination, your thoughts, into a small physical area. Imagine pretty much every software engineer or finance person being able to, disconnect from their desk and look at holographic monitors on a beach and doing their work from there. That's not going to be science fiction. It's the modern office place.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future. A startup called Meta thinks it's getting there first, thanks to a big bet that it's made on augmented reality.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Meta.
Thank you.
Call it a 360-degree office where you can spatialize your thoughts as part of your workflow for education, architecture, design, engineering, etc.
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality. VR totally blocks your ability to see or hear the real world. AR overlays holograms onto what you already see. Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel familiar.
You grab the hologram instead of using a controller or a mouse, and your brain already knows how to do it. In other words, we've designed an operating system that humanity has always known how to use. So you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball, and now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right? You see those two circles? They get small, and then they turn into this glowing white ball, and then I can move my hand around supernaturally. I can do this with two hands and rotate the thing. I can stretch it. I can throw it back right into the shelving system, and that's all you have to learn to become a modern worker.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors, trading them in for Meta's augmented reality headsets. Mayron thinks that in less than a decade, we'll all be just wearing strips of glass that can project holograms.
In the early 80s, everybody had computers on their desktop, but no one was using them because they had a lot of work to do. So they were still using typewriters. And at some point, the CEO took all the typewriters away and everybody was forced to use their computers. So it's very exciting to see a new generation of technology, a new paradigm.
I consider us like pioneers in the holographic wild. I'm pulling up my browser with my hands and sending out emails to colleagues and just kind of really acclimating to the new environment.
Now you're putting on my computer, essentially. Our digital lives live on our phones. We have all of our pictures and notes and all these kinds of things. So, and why don't you write yourself a little sticky note? I like it. And go ahead and just take your fist right over the top of the sticky note and close your fist. And now...
Oh, what? Meta's own transition to augmented reality has run into plenty of unexpected problems. And it's still going to be a while before you'll start to see these devices in your office. But I think it's a future worth waiting for.
If we could see these holograms between us, we will...
Ladies and gentlemen, for you, all of you who would like to place an order and trade Japanese yen, time, place an order at 103,558. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm placing an order to buy Japanese yen at 103,558. Let's see what's going to happen and when I'm going to fill this order. Speak to you later, guys.
This is Hatsune Miku, Japan's sensational virtual pop star. She's released over 100,000 songs in multiple languages and performed sold-out concerts around the world. Her image has appeared in games, on TV, in car races, and is even etched on the side of a Japanese space rocket.
I came for Hatsune Miku, Carlos.
She's Lady Gaga's favorite digital pop star and opened shows for her in the US 3 years ago. Tens of thousands of fans attended her exhibition and live shows near Tokyo recently.
理想のアイドルっていうと、どの曲でもミクはすごい綺麗に歌ってくれる。
她没有缺点啊，没有任何让我们感到不开心的一些新闻。
She's everything to everybody. That's probably why she's so popular.
Miku's creator Hiroyuki Ito and his Sapporo-based company have been developing the virtual diva for over 10 years.
初音ミクとは、キャラクターとしてすごく、YouTube とかで検索すると、たくさんの初音ミクが出てくるんですけども、元々の、初音ミクのその原点は歌声を合成する、ソフトウェアなんです。
Both the software and character are named Hatsune Miku, meaning the first sound of the future. Originally based on Yamaha's Vocaloid technology, Miku the software has a sound bank containing voice samples and a huge array of tools. You input the melody and lyrics, then Miku the character sings them. To date, Krypton has sold 120,000 software licenses at $200 each to fans around the world who use it to create numerous songs and share them online. Some of the fan-created songs are chosen to be part of Miku's concerts, for which they're paid a royalty fee.
元々初音ミクっていうその、存在自体がそのボトムアップって言いますか。
As you can see, position opened on Japanese yen, 103.558. Long position, so let's see how long it will take us to get the profit from it.
To perform with Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star is interesting and surprising.
今年で3年ぐらい、ちょうど3年ぐらいやってきて、ライブも数十本、数百本だったので、そういうことが演奏によって起こせるためのそういう器みたいな感じになっています。初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってあり。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいそのテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans, it goes even further.
初音ミクって魂がないので、だからみんなに魂を作り上げるために存在する。
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do, just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move Heart Rate Hit Outdoor Running. Let's get moving and warm up in Zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
what does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning, who used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the Collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons in all fairness. Don't you think?
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
Expose everything you won't admit. And action! This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like, love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh.
But to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What if everyone's a girl, Superwoman? I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time.
My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea.
Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone.
Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada, was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And my mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers, over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're going to go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010, and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms, and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad, and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe. And my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oi, Lily, wear the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone?
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name. Maybe this should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She starred in a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up!
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views and the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
CTE is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CT in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in a laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice.
Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime, you know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left The Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company. And that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW!
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! It's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag Give Divas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music. And their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Our world is changing. Every day, it changes a little faster. Some changes are too small to see. Others, too big to handle. Sometimes, change feels slow. So slow, we don't even notice. Other times, it happens all at once, and we can't keep up. For our climate, change means many things. And between too small to see and too big to handle, there is a whole world of difference. The clock is ticking. This is Bloomberg Green.
Saving the seas. This week, the deep-sea diver who stopped writing the ocean's obituary to find a solution. Enric Sala tells us why the next 10 years matter most. And globalization needs to get greener. Shipping accounts for nearly an eighth of all transport emissions. How can the industry clean up its act? Plus, protecting coastlines comes at a huge environmental cost. But one Israeli startup found a way to keep the sea out and the animals in. From London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green. After more than a decade of studying the ocean as an academic, Enric Sala realized he was writing the ocean's obituary. He quit his job and became a full-time conservationist. As an in-house explorer for National Geographic, he's clocked more than 5,000 open water dives. He's also founded Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to lobby countries to protect their oceans. To date, it has helped create marine reserves equivalent to half the size of Canada. I spoke to him about his mission and why it's so urgent.
The state of the world's oceans is really bad. We have lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Sharks, groupers, cod, tuna. More than half of the fish stocks are overfished, which means that we are taking them out of the water faster than they can reproduce. More than half of the ocean is affected by industrial fishing, and global warming is killing coral reefs all around the world. The ocean is in a trajectory of decline.
Can you just visualize for our viewers who never get to see the kind of things you are able to see, what an ocean and healthy ecosystem looks like versus one that's next to a bustling economic and industrialized area?
Coral reefs in the United States, in the Florida Keys, are down to only 2% of what they used to be. Before, 80 to 90% of the bottom on a coral reef in the Caribbean was covered by live coral. Now, Florida Keys have only 2%. The average in the Caribbean is about 5% of the bottom covered by live coral. The rest is covered by slime and seaweed. And most of the fish you can see are this big. And it is very, very rare that if you jump into any place in the Caribbean at random, you see a shark. It's very, very rare. Now, let's go to Millennium Atoll, for example. An atoll that is uninhabited and fished south of the equator in the Central Pacific, belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. 2009, we conducted the first underwater expedition to this island, and I still remember the first time. Jumped over the side of the boat, and as soon as the bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by 15 gray reef sharks. After a couple minutes, the sharks decided that we were boring, and they went back to do their thing. And you look down, 90% of the seafloor is covered by thriving coral, and it's full of fish, and a sea turtle comes by. Now, this abundance that we rarely see anywhere except in well-managed marine reserves. This is what the ocean used to be like, and this is what we have learned from going to these pristine places.
And you write in your book that you're writing the obituary of ocean life. What's the cure?
The cure is doing less harm. Basically, there are three things that we are doing to the ocean. One is we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. Two, we are turning the ocean warmer and more acidic because of man-made climate change. And three, we are throwing in everything that we don't want, our waste and our plastic. We need basically to reverse these trends.
Does this mean that a lot of this falls to governments and their policies?
That's a big part of it, because it is governments that regulate fishing and mineral extraction and oil extraction. It is governments that have the legal authority to create large marine reserves in the ocean. But also, local communities have an important role to play because some of the most successful protected areas in the ocean are community-led and community-managed marine reserves. So when the fish come back, the divers come in. And that creates huge economic opportunities through ecotourism. These areas that are managed by communities are very successful because the communities have a vested interest in having as many fish as possible inside them so they can enjoy the benefits.
What from the pandemic has changed your view when it comes to protection of the environment?
Nature has given us a very strong signal of how fast it can recover if we just give it space. Everybody was fascinated by all these videos of the whales and the dolphins coming into marinas and mountain lions on the streets of Santiago in Chile, wild goats in the UK. Nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back if we just give it space. This is why we need to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030.
How do healthy marine ecosystems help in the fight against climate change, though?
Most people see the ocean as a victim of climate change, but the ocean can also be a solution because we know that the more life that is in the ocean, like big fish and big whales, the more these organisms help to make the ocean productive and absorb more CO2. The kelp forest, seagrass beds, all of these are important ecosystems in the ocean that are similar to the forests on the land that capture a lot of our carbon pollutions.
What are you most excited about in your field?
We have 10 years to fix this problem. Global fisheries catch is going down, stocks are collapsing. Business as usual means that by 2050, 90% of the coral reefs are gone, that most commercial fisheries have collapsed. That affects food security, that affects migration of people. We have 10 years to get to peak greenhouse gas emissions and then go carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 years to protect at least 30% of the ocean so we can restore much of this health and productivity, not just for saving biodiversity, but also saving our life support system. We are not talking about something that is apart from us. We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. So these 10 years are probably the most critical in the history of humanity.
The most accurate measurements of changing oceans will come from space. While Enric Sala explores what lies beneath, a new satellite is giving us data from above.
We'll learn more about our oceans and climate change, but from space. A new satellite's been launched from California. Its mission: track the accelerating rise of sea levels.
Well, the main instruments on board include a dual-frequency radar altimeter. And this is the primary instrument of the mission, and that's the one that's measuring sea surface height, significant wave height, and wind speed over the ocean. And from those measurements, we can actually have the superb measurements that we expect of sea level rise.
Data gathered from Sentinel-6 will be used alongside information from other satellites to build as complete a picture of the oceans as possible.
With a long record, we can precisely measure the acceleration. We eventually can detect new regime, tipping points. For example, if there is a runaway in the melting of Greenland or Antarctica, sea level will record this runaway change because it is an integrator of all changes that are occurring in the climate system. So we will be able to see some change, big change in the global climate.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects that sea level rise will increasingly threaten U.S. coastlines. One example, the southern tip of Manhattan is expected to flood 20 to 40 times a year by 2030.
11 of the 15 largest megacities are located at the coast, and this number will double. The number of people living in coastal area will double by 2060. So, knowing how much sea level is rising at the coast and how much it will rise in the future in coastal areas is as obvious. It's obviously a major goal for human beings.
Coming up, from sails to steam to oil, the shipping industry is no stranger to change. But how will it navigate the next transition? This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. Now, for your roundup of this week's latest climate news, Jennifer Zabazaja has your Green in Brief.
Here's the climate news you need to know. Deforestation of the world's largest rainforest has hit a 12-year high. More than 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed in 2020. That's a 9.5% increase from a year earlier. Government data shows that destruction has soared since President Jair Bolsonaro took office and weakened environmental enforcement. The Amazon is home to millions of species and plants and is critical in the fight against climate change. Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but at what cost to the environment? The cryptocurrency is energy intensive, and there are concerns if it becomes mainstream. According to MIT, back in 2018, Bitcoin's carbon footprint was almost as big as Portugal's. Want to get better at tackling climate change? We'll hire more women. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Firms with 30% or more women in top jobs tend to perform better when it comes to the environment and are more likely to set clear climate goals. Shopping online is more popular than ever now, but the price of convenience is measured in CO2, and more deliveries means more fuel burned and more packaging wasted. So what can companies do? Well, many are becoming more efficient and sourcing more clean energy for their data centers and warehouses. And England's farmers will be paid to go green after Brexit. As European subsidies are phased out, they'll get new money to encourage them to produce healthy, sustainable food. Poor farming practices are one of the leading drivers of water pollution and the loss of biodiversity. I'm Jennifer Zabazaja in New York. Anne-Marie, back to you.
The shipping industry is more than just the grease on the wheels of globalization. It's its chief enabler. 11 billion tons of goods are transported by ship each year, the biggest contributors being 2 billion tons of oil, 1 billion tons of iron ore, and 350 million tons of grain. According to the International Chamber of Shipping, 80% of Europe's imports and exports happen over the seas. And for such a vast industry, it also contributes its fair share of emissions. Shipping makes up 12% of global transport energy consumption. So how does it clean up its act? Earlier, I caught up with Bloomberg Green reporter Laura Milan about just how big of a challenge this is going to be for the industry.
One of the main issues is size. So about 90% of the world's cargo is moved by ships. So obviously changing such a huge industry is not going to be fast and it's not going to be easy. The second issue has to do with technology. So ships obviously travel for many days at sea. It's not as easy for them to refuel as it would be for a car, for example, going on a road. And the sector still hasn't found a technology that's economically viable and that's zero emissions and equivalent to the electric batteries for cars, for example.
But actions are being put in place to make the industry a bit more environmentally friendly. Walk us through those steps that they're taking.
That's it. So there's a first step that would involve using low emission fuels or biofuels that would significantly reduce the existing emissions. And then at regulatory level, when it comes to the policy and the governments, there are steps being made as well. I would say that the most significant ones come from the European Union, which started to track emissions a few years ago and is now looking to include shipping emissions in the emissions trading system. So that would significantly reduce and help calculate the emissions from the shipping industry. Now, China is taking similar steps. So at the moment, regions need to report shipping emissions to the central government. And finally, we have the International Maritime Organization with a pledge to reduce shipping emissions by 50% in 2050. Now, we must say that that pledge has been considered insufficient by environmental groups, but at least some steps are being taken.
So to get to 2050, the industry obviously is going to need to start tapping some new technologies. What new technologies are you seeing being introduced into the shipping industry?
So we have seen pilot technologies being developed for years now, but what's interesting about this current moment is that we're seeing big players invest in these technologies that are not yet economically viable, but that one day might be. So for example, we are seeing earlier this year, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, Cargill, saying they will invest in attaching sails to their ships so they can make any technology that they run their ships on more efficient. Similarly, we have seen a spin-off of Airbus, the aeronautics company, developing a similar application with kites. We have been following also developments in hydrogen. So at the moment, hydrogen fuel seems like a good option, a possible option when it has been developed and when it becomes economically viable. And we have Vestas, for example, the world's largest turbine maker, developing some ships that will be able to run on hydrogen in the near future.
Coming up, rising sea levels means humans need to get creative when it comes to coastal defenses. But how do we protect both ourselves and the environment? One Israeli startup may have the answer. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Green. In London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. After water, what's the resource that humans use the most? It's concrete, 3 tons a year for every person on the planet. And engineers estimate it's used twice as much as all other building materials combined. And it comes with a huge environmental cost. Concrete, not just in cities, it's a common feature on our coastlines too. And that's taking a toll on biodiversity. But one Israeli startup has found a way of making sea defenses stronger and encouraging life to thrive.
If you take a look at concrete structures like breakwaters or seawalls, the water around them is often clear. That's not actually a good thing, because it means there's no life.
Marine species are actually most abundant in coastal areas, but it's also where us humans prefer to live too. So when we build here, we drive away marine life.
The concrete in the marine world has a lot of additives, a lot of chemicals, and some of those materials are actually leaching out, and they're actually prohibiting marine life to thrive. If we keep developing without any regards to natural communities, there is a tilting point from which beyond we cannot really go back.
In the coastal city of Tel Aviv, an Israeli startup wants to revolutionize our urban coastlines. Their sea defenses are transforming lifeless man-made structures into teeming ecosystems. They do this by replacing standard concrete with their own special cement formulas.
As opposed to regular cement-based concrete, e-concrete includes certain elements that enhance the growth of marine flora and fauna of plants and animals. Our admix, which is kind of our secret sauce, is basically kind of sealing the concrete, making it less aggressive for the marine environment. That once we add it, we enable life to flourish.
In the lab, the team run tests to identify what mixes will work best for marine life.
So we take really ice cube-sized concrete slabs of different compositions, and we put larvae, 20, 30, 50. We need to have a lot of replicates. We're geeky scientists, so we have to have a lot of replication and controls. And then within a few days or just a few weeks, we can get an answer on their preference. So obviously, if they die, they have a very low tolerance to that specific concrete mix design. And if they thrive or they flourish, we can quantify that very quickly.
E-concrete says it typically sees double the biodiversity of regular grey concrete. From fish and sea caterpillars on their armour blocks to crabs on these tidal pools that sit on the shoreline.
This unit holds water during the low tide, so it's always moist, and therefore it has a very comfortable habitat for crabs and sea anemones and sea stars, etc. These pools have been here for less than 3 months, and this is already what you can see. It's covered with life. See the rock around it, which has been here for probably 10, 20, maybe even more years, only has a thin layer of green algae, and that's it.
As well as the composition of the cement mix, e-concrete designs its products specifically to the marine environment it will be deployed, to create niches for endangered species, or to develop nurseries like these oyster beds. The final part of the equation is creating complex surface textures to mimic natural rock or coral, an environment that helps anchor young organisms.
When concrete elements are being cast, the typical goal is to have a very slick surface, very, very smooth. The idea is to get the water to flow right across it. When we're designing e-concrete with a rough surface, we want to do the complete opposite. We want to slow the water when they are crossing the structure so that the larvae can actually adhere and attach to the surface.
E-concrete has to offer its clients more than just ecological credentials. Over time, they've discovered that creating hospitable habitats for marine life adds another advantage, one that is surely hard to ignore.
We've seen evidence to the fact that the growth of the organisms on the concrete create kind of a layer of defense. Just the addition of weight, we can actually gain stability and strength over time.
This is let's say the unit when we put it in the water. And this is after a year in the water. And what you can see here is all the oysters are completely covering it. We designed the units so they can withstand the forces and perform in terms of structural performance, but they can also be a backbone for ecological enhancement.
The company tests its miniature designs in tanks full of real seawater, rocks, plants, and animal life from around the world.
What we're looking for is the accumulation of calcium carbonate on the surface of the concrete of different mixes and different designs. This is the process that we call biogenic buildup. So with time, we get a buildup of calcium carbonate that is sourced from marine organisms on the surface of the concrete. And we actually encapsulate the concrete with a natural rock. So when the organism dies, in case of a coral, it will die, and then another coral will sit on it, and that's how a reef is growing.
The hope that our man-made structures could become stronger over time also means better economics. The units require less maintenance and could therefore stay in the water for longer. E-concrete, though, is just a few years old, so it needs more time to really quantify the longevity of its products. But the company are certain their products are better for the environment, and not just in terms of improving biodiversity.
We're kind of trying to offset some of that immense carbon footprint of the concrete industry.
Construction is responsible for about 11% of global carbon emissions. By adding a biological crust to their products, e-concrete prevents some CO2 from being released into the atmosphere.
For every kilogram of calcium carbonate being created by those marine organisms, we're offsetting 120 grams of CO2. So think about building a port infrastructure or a city waterfront that is an active carbon sink. I think that's a great advantage of the technology.
That does it for this week, but let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Follow us at Climate. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, streaming on YouTube. I was going to say it's Tuesday. It's not Tuesday. It's Thursday.
I have great news. It's Thursday. What do we call a Thursday here, right?
We call it
Friday's Eve.
Right, Friday's Eve. January 21st, 2021. First full day of the Biden administration. We're going to hear from the president, also Dr. Anthony Fauci, on the virus and their strategy. They are laying it out, Tim.
Yeah, they are. I mean, look, it's clear that the Biden team's agenda is the virus and the recovery from the pandemic.
I mean, everything stems off of that. So we've got to get that underhand. We're going to talk virus. We're going to talk politics, the year ahead. Will 2021 be better or worse than 2020? It is this week's entire issue of Bloomberg Business Week magazine.
Could have gotten any worse in 2020? I don't think so.
Please, fingers crossed it's going to get better. All right, lots to come over the next few hours. Let's get you going, though, on this Thursday with a check on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, and happy Thursday to you both. Here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, green on the screen. We're looking at records. However, it has been a choppy session. Stocks swinging between gains and losses. Right to the numbers. We'll give you the why in a moment here. S&P up 2 at 38.54, up by 0.1%. The Dow up another another 9. We're looking at records up less than 0.1%. NASDAQ, though, what a surge there, up 59 points, up 0.4%. In the year-to-date column, yes, I know the year is very young, but so far this very young year for January, NASDAQ up by 4.9%. 10-year down 7/30 seconds, 10-year yield 1.10%. Gold, little change, down by about 0.2%, 18.67 the ounce, down 4.61 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%, 53.13 a barrel. The advance in stocks stalling somewhat, major indexes at or near records. Tech shares continue to march higher on anticipation that more fiscal spending will revive economic growth. And that is the latest. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
See, there's something in the air. It's not just me, Tim Stanovic, because Charlie Pellet
Never stumbles. Wow, calling out Charlie Pellet.
No, I will give you the explanation. I was going to make some joke about Thursday, and then I said, you know what? Why call attention to the two of you? Let it drop and move on.
And then Nasser just goes right there.
Exactly. Anyway, happy Thursday to you both.
Thank you, Charlie.
Charlie, thank you so much. All right, lots going on. Let's set the Business Week agenda, because we've got back with us our Michael McKee, International Economics and Policy Correspondent at Bloomberg News. He's on the phone in New York City. Dave Wilson's with us, Stocks Editor at Bloomberg News, on the remote access from New Jersey. If it's Thursday and it's Mike McKee, it must be Weekly Jobless, Mike.
Yeah, I figured you'd get to that sooner or later.
Yes.
900,000. That's still a very big number. It's lower than expectations, but I mean, really, does it matter when you're up that high? We can quibble about whether the number is completely accurate or not, but it just shows that the labor market is still struggling. And this was the week, last week was the week that the survey for the January payrolls report doesn't necessarily bode well for job growth. I think everybody's in January. Towns keep people losing their jobs.
Yeah, it's not good. Hey, Mike, I'm not sure whether our line is not so great with you. Tim, you want to follow?
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that we still saw claims like we saw this morning at 8:30, Mike, we're still seeing tech shares leading U.S. stocks to all-time highs. What gives with the market?
Well, you've got some good news in the economic data today. Housing starts and building permits both up big, biggest since 2006 for a one-month gain. And the economy are still benefiting from zero rates, and there's still demand out there. And then the business outlook really strong, went from 11.1 to 26.5. So there is hope in that district that things will get better. And I think people are starting to, well, they have been trading on the idea of the vaccines getting there, but maybe even the idea that Joe Biden is president now and has a plan for distributing vaccines is contributing to confidence.
Right. Transparency, we need some specifics. That's what everybody's looking for. Dave Wilson, though, it's a little bit of an off day today.
Yeah, it is, but let's face it, we've kind of gotten through the first wave of the fourth quarter earnings reports with the biggest financial companies out. So now it's kind of a waiting game until you see more in terms of results, on a broader group of companies. We start to get that after the close of trading with IBM and Intel due to report. There's going to be a whole lot more coming next week and the week after that people have to work their way through. Beyond that, I mean, what sort of jumps out is like the electric vehicle craze has gone beyond Tesla and is really kind of affecting a broader group of U.S. auto stocks. I mean, you see Ford Motor is one of the best performers of the day in the S&P 500. It's up more than 30% for the year. So is General Motors, by the way, which is actually down today, but nonetheless, sort of that EV interest among investors is really showing up. And then you look at engine makers. I mean, PACCAR, which is involved with engines, trucks, whatever, best performer on the day in the S&P 500, and Cummins in the engine business, Borg, Warner, and Auto Parts. So, it's interesting to kind of see that play out now in the U.S. after having lifted Tesla, to like $800 billion plus in market value. You've also seen the Chinese vehicle companies, the likes of BYD and NIO, really be popular with investors. Now it's Ford and GM.
Dave, I got to ask you about Bitcoin. We haven't talked about it in a couple of weeks here, but today is a day where it's sliding down 9.25%. is what I'm seeing on the Bloomberg right now. It's struggling to stay above the 10-day moving average. Investors, some of them at least calling the market a bubble. Why are we seeing the slide today?
Well, and that's always the question. I mean, because Bitcoin, as much as there's a greater institutional focus on this digital currency, I mean, it's still awfully volatile relative to other types of investments. And, so companies that get involved with Bitcoin, I mean, their shares become as volatile. Give you one example. Silvergate Capital, it's a smaller company that provides services to digital currency providers, and its stock is down about 9.5% at the moment. So you certainly do see a carryover to the stock market when you get these swings in the likes of Bitcoin.
Mike McKee, next week we've got a Fed meeting, the first of the new year, so it'll be interesting. What are you going to be watching out for? What do you expect the Fed to do?
I don't think we're going to get much out of them at all.
Okay.
The economy is in about the same position it was, and they didn't do anything in December. And they really don't know how fast we're going to get the vaccine out and how quick we're going to see any kind of additional stimulus from Congress. So it's probably a wait and see kind of thing for them at this point.
All right. Look at that.
Yeah.
Wait and see. That's kind of the way. I'm waiting and seeing for Biden right now, I should say. We are expecting the president.
It's a wait and see kind of year.
Yeah, we are expecting the president to come out and make comments on the vaccine, or on the
Yes.
COVID recovery plan. We'll bring those to you live when we get them.
All right, Mike McKee, thank you so much. International economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News. Dave Wilson, stock editor at Bloomberg News. Dave will be back a little bit later on with his chart and stock of the day. Yeah, I've been just watching Twitter because I know we are expected to hear from the president, to hear about his and his team's COVID response team. So we'll get to the president as soon as he begins speaking. We've got that. We're going to check in with Alyssa Rapp, CEO of the healthcare solutions company Surgical Solutions. We've talked to her a lot, Tim, over the last year or so in terms of their support for healthcare communities and their healthcare workers, and we'll get an update on kind of what they're seeing in terms of the rollout of the vaccine.
Yeah, that's what I'm eager to hear from her about. Two things. One, how is this affecting staffing, where she's sending her staff? Are they getting the vaccine? Are they vaccinated? And now that healthcare workers are hopefully the ones who are not getting the virus because they're inoculated.
Right.
We're not seeing the staffing troubles at hospitals that we saw earlier this year.
Which is what so many people were worried about. We've got Spencer Critchley. He's back. We got kind of shortchanged yesterday, so he's going to come back. He's got a book out, Patriots of Two Nations, Why Trump Was Inevitable, What Happens Next. He worked, was a consultant to the Obama campaign, so we've got that. We're going to talk more about the year ahead issue, everything that you've got to be focusing on here in 2021. Then we've got a double dose of tech. We've got the CEO and co-founder of Twilio, one of the high flyers of 2020, and then we've got Intel earnings after the close, so we'll break down those earnings.
It is a packed show.
Yes. Quickly, Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day. It's 40%. New Jersey is one of the riskiest places to get into real estate. The index that is by Atom Data Solutions about home affordability, equity, and foreclosure data found that 40% of the 20 riskiest markets in the U.S. are in 8 New Jersey counties. Aren't we lucky?
Carol, you're from New Jersey.
I checked. I don't think my count.
You okay?
I don't know. I think it's on there.
Okay.
All right, let's get to world and national news. Nancy Lyons waiting. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden will be providing details of his COVID-19 vaccination plan in just a few minutes. Earlier today, the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, thanked Biden for his decision to maintain U.S. membership in the WHO.
The role of the United States, its role, global role, is very, very crucial. And I send my deep thanks and warm congratulations to President Biden and Vice President Harris and to the American people.
U.S. infectious disease chief Anthony Fauci says the U.S. will also join COVAX, the 92-nation collaboration seeking to deploy vaccines all around the world. Fauci will have his own briefing later this afternoon. Confirmation hearings continue today on Capitol Hill for President Biden's cabinet nominees. Senators who've been hearing from former South Bend, Indiana mayor and 2020 presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg have been asking him about tapping to be the next transportation secretary. He says there's a lot of work to do to improve the nation's infrastructure.
A mission that will not only keep more people safe, but will grow our economy as we look to the future. Now is the time, and I believe we have a real chance to deliver for the American people.
The full details of President Biden's infrastructure plan are expected to be released next month. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is calling on the U.S. and Russia to extend a major nuclear arms agreement before it expires February 5th. It limits each country to no more than 1,500 deployed nuclear warheads and 700 deployed missiles and bombers. The Washington Post is reporting the U.S. will ask for a 5-year extension. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Back to you, Carol and Tim.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. And just for everybody out there listening, watching us on YouTube, Tim and I have just decided there's something in the air today. We're just going to lean into it, embrace it, and be okay with it.
It's Lysol in here because I've been Lysoling everything.
I think that might be it. You
That's
and
what
me
it is.
both were like...
Yeah, I think that might be getting to our brains.
All right, let's increase the ventilation. Lots of virus headlines, and let's talk about some, especially as we wait hearing from President Joe Biden. He is planning to issue a sweeping set of executive orders to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, really kind of ramping up his efforts, Tim. But I think the nation is looking for this at this point.
Yeah, look, what the United States hasn't had is a sort of centralized response to this, whether it was in the beginning with testing, with personal protective equipment, or toward the end of the Trump administration with the rollout of vaccine. A lot of that has been left to the states. Biden, though, today is set to invoke orders would overhaul and unify the U.S. approach to testing. He's going to use federal powers to stabilize the supply chain with the Defense Production Act and critical medical supplies, and boost the government's ability to provide rapid and equitable vaccine distribution. That's according to our reporters in a Biden administration briefing.
And his COVID-19 task force coordinator, Joe Biden, said that what we're inheriting is so much worse than we could have imagined. But he did say that the team is confident that Biden's promise to immunize 100 million people in 100 days could be achieved. So that is kind of our backdrop here. And this is on a day where we've got cases exceeding 97 million, deaths surpassing 2 million, more than 54.3 million shots have been given worldwide. And I have to say, the year ahead issue of Bloomberg Business Week, it's covering everything, the major trends, the companies, the things that you need to be thinking about, but so much is contingent on what happens in terms of COVID and getting our arms around it and getting it under control. On the front lines of COVID-19 is Alyssa Rapp. She's been one of the voices we've talked to many times over the past year. She's CEO of the healthcare solutions company, Surgical Solutions. She joins us once again on the phone from Deerfield, Illinois. Alyssa, good to have you back with us. How are we? How are we doing? What are you seeing in terms of your team when it comes to COVID and also the vaccine rollout?
Caroline, thanks for having me back. I have to say that I am heartened that the president-elect
Or president, we should say now.
I think we have a little technical problem, so hopefully we'll see what's going on with Alyssa's line. We'll come
Yeah,
back
while
to
we're
her.
working to get her back, I do want to go through some of these other executive orders from the Biden administration. Because again, Carol, as you and I have been talking about, not just today, but for the past few days, I mean, what the Biden administration is doing is making the pandemic and the response to the pandemic a clear priority from day one. A couple interesting developments here. One of those is the United States joining COVAX, and that's the international organization that works on vaccines. And also going back into the World Health Organization, what Dr. Anthony Fauci talked about just yesterday.
Right, exactly. Being part of the global effort to get this under control, and in getting it under control here, also we're going to expect to hear the president talk about invoking the Defense Production Act to really get supplies up. I think we've got the technologies. As I said, we're leaning in. There's something in the air. Alyssa Rapp is with us, CEO of Surgical Solutions, once again on the phone from Deerfield, Illinois. Alyssa, so let's pick it up. What are you seeing? Tell me kind of what's front of mind when it comes to COVID and the vaccine rollout.
Yeah, Carolyn, Tim, thank you for having me back. I am absolutely seeing more vaccine availability, and our frontline healthcare workers in places like Houston and New York City are getting access to getting the vaccine, which is great. And I've known from personal anecdotes that family members 75 and up are also getting their first shot this week and next, which is across many states. However, there's still a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. And what we've seen even at a couple of our hospital sites is even if you're a credentialed employee or contractor, even if you have a vaccine appointment, now there's a third database that people are expected to be tracked in when their vaccines are given. And if any technical difficulties like we just had occur and a database doesn't map from the employee contractor database to the separate vaccine tracking database, even if you have an appointment and are a bona fide employee or contractor, you can't always get the shot. And so there's just a lot of bureaucracy, and there's got to be a streamlined way we continue to immunize, or we will never achieve 100 million in 100 days.
Oh, that's just disconcerting to hear. Are there places where your frontline staff are that are better than others?
You know, I think that we've seen it be rolled out successfully in all places, and we've seen bureaucracy in all places. We have 300 employees in 9 states, so it's really a facility by facility or system by system question, to be fair. But I will say the places I am most optimistic about having a partner to our federal government and our people, our American public.
Right.
If we can partner with CVS, Walmart, Costco, Walgreens, name that tune, and go to places where people are used to getting flu shots, where they're used to shopping on a regular basis, leverage the military.
It's like you've read Business Week magazine, Alyssa, because they have a story that's just specifically about that. That maybe the success in terms of getting that vaccine rollout is contingent on relying on the big pharmacies, but even your local pharmacy. Like, they need to be the place to go.
Absolutely. I even read recently this week that the governor of Washington State is going to partner with Starbucks. I mean, anything we can do to leverage existing infrastructure. Because when we create new infrastructure, even in healthcare facilities, let alone anywhere else, it's expensive, bureaucratic, and cumbersome. Leverage what we have, keep things moving as quickly as possible, and get it done. Herd immunity being obviously the goal here.
It really raises the question, Alyssa, why we didn't see earlier on public-private partnerships when it comes to a widespread vaccine rollout. To be discussed on a different day.
But isn't that important? Well, it's interesting that, forgive me, because I just want to jump in, because, you talk about the bureaucracy and the logistical problems, and I know what maybe Kansas needs versus what New York needs is going to be different. But nonetheless, do you think those are quick fixes? And I don't say quick in that it's easy, but do you think that this new administration approaching it differently can get this quickly under control so that we are seeing the bureaucracy taken out of the systems and the logistical snafus, Alyssa, taken out as well?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful. There is an opportunity to hit reset and start sprinting. And if this administration is able to do so, we're going to be much better off.
So, Alyssa, you mentioned that you have hundreds of employees in 9 states, I believe. What's the portion of them that have been vaccinated thus far? Because these are frontline workers.
It's an excellent question. We have about 23% that have been vaccinated to date, and there's a huge push going now.
I was expecting 75, 80%.
I know.
23%, that's a really small number.
Listen, I got an email this morning at one of our biggest facilities where one of our frustrated team members on the COVID listserv said, I'm registered, what I articulated earlier, I'm registered, I'm credentialed, and they don't have me in the 3rd vaccine database. And so this whole notion, it's very frustrating. Yes, not for lack of desire. It's we got to cut through the red tape.
Yeah. All right. So if we can cut through the red tape, so how do you see this playing out? I mean, Tim and I constantly are like, all right, so when do we get back to normal? Whenever we're talking to somebody who's a healthcare professional or head of a company like you are that are seeing everything play out firsthand, what's your expectations based on what we're seeing so far? What's your expectation if things can dramatically change in a positive way?
If things can dramatically change in a positive way, I see 75 and up having their 2nd shot by President's Day. I'm hopeful that teachers and other essential frontline workers, such as grocery store workers, et cetera, will be having their 1st, if not 2nd vaccine by the end of Q1, by the end of March. And I'm really hopeful that Tier 2 and Tier 3, let alone Tier 4, like healthy people in their 30s and 40s, can start getting vaccinated and complete that. April, May, June, and we can get back to normal come July, August, September.
Okay, I'm okay with this timeline. You're still using the the numbers 2021, which is good to me.
God bless America. Let's hope so.
No, listen, and the thing is, I don't know. Do we need to be thinking, Alyssa, that folks, we got to figure this out because this is just going to be the first of probably many perhaps tough viruses that are facing our civilization going forward?
Yes, but I also think that the scientists are so brilliant in this country, and we have just done such an extraordinary job coming with a protein-based solve in this particular vaccine that I am actually cautiously optimistic in the innovations and the patents being filed of how much more responsive we will be in the future and leveraging infrastructure and leveraging our great minds in this country to get these solves. But we got to get through this one first. And remember, the tests for the vaccines for children are only being tested right now, which means we have to also make sure that the children are going to be vaccinated by the fall so we don't have another year of wonky hybrid, let alone all virtual education.
So you're saying if we can get through this one, the next pandemic, which you believe could be coming at some point, I mean, this is once in 100 years that we saw this, but who knows what the future holds. we learned a lot from this one, and we could start on the vaccines as soon as we are able to actually see the new virus, right?
I sure would like to think so.
Yeah.
I sure would like to think so.
Well, and I also do wonder what comes out on the other side of this, Alyssa, in terms of, I know the Bloomberg New Economy Forum, you know, the whole idea of kind of the world working together, although we had not so, great cooperation on everything, but it certainly felt that way when it came to a vaccine specifically. Like, think about if we can all combine our efforts globally and some of the big health ailments that we are dealing with, or some big healthcare issues, how we could kind of finally solve them.
It would be awesome. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're talking about solving great global health crises, whether it's COVID or cancer, you're really talking about the best and brightest minds in this country and worldwide needing to come together and thinking about how to create proteins that or other type of structures that can edit DNA and do things that are really next generation to change people's prognosis or susceptibility to getting diseases at all. And that is, of course, going to require a global partnership on many levels, and I'm hopeful that this new administration will position us well for that too.
You know, what we talked about using the big the big drugstore companies, whether it's your CVS, your Walgreens, your Costco's, you know, Rite Aids, to help with the vaccine, you know, getting the vaccine out. You shared with us some notes about the solution isn't to reinvent U.S. healthcare from the ground up, but rather to lean into the things that the U.S. system does well. And that obviously applies to COVID and the vaccine. Totally. But if we look at it bigger and broader, what does the U.S. healthcare system do really, really well? What don't we? And that really needs to be fixed.
At a meta level, we do innovation extraordinarily, and we treat the world's toughest illnesses best in class, better than anyone. But that's a system designed to treat illness, and the system needs to be designed to incent and support wellness. And telehealth and all sorts of innovations that were accelerated during the pandemic are actually really poised to continue accelerating in their market penetration in the years to come, which is probably good for preventative medicine and good for wellness-based care. But it's that delicate balance. If everyone's incentive and makes money in the healthcare system when people are sick, then the system itself needs to also re-examine the fundamentals and how do you really make sure you have a system designed to keep people healthy.
I just want to mention we are waiting some comments from President Biden and his team, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, on the virus. There are some headlines crossing the Bloomberg, and it does say that Dr. Anthony Fauci says J&J has sufficient enough data on the vaccine, says he suffered brief side effects from his second vaccine dose. He's speaking to reporters. We're going to get a playback on that and play it out. He says he expects 1 million vaccine doses to be given a day.
It's good that, look, I'm glad he talked about the side effects that he had, brief side effects. If we remember back to the first shot that he got, he was so clinical in the way that he was describing the way it felt, clearly as a doctor.
Yeah.
Alyssa, I want to ask you about how you would advise policymakers in Washington right now about reforming healthcare. I mean, it's difficult to think about a question that big when we are in the midst of a pandemic, but as you just mentioned, the healthcare system in the country is broken. You have experience in the healthcare industry. How would you advise policymakers to tackle it?
I really believe in this concept of kid care. I believe any child in this country, no matter to whom you're born and where you're born, should have access to tremendous preventative health and medicine. And if you start there with the fundamentals of health and wellness at that ground level, I don't think anyone on either side of the political aisle could contest that kid care, whatever that policy-wise ends up being in a detailed way, but a profound approach to nutrition, wellness, and health for children is something that's apolitical and obviously where I would start if I were in charge of the healthcare policy for the Biden administration. And I understand Obamacare did in many ways try to encapsulate all different segments of our population, but there's always more we could do to support our children. And if we had a system designed for their health and well-being from the ground up, we'd be setting them up and the next generations up for even greater.
Is this the type of thing that would be better on the federal level or better left up to states?
That's a tough call. I don't know if I haven't thought about it enough, Tim. That's a good question, but you could argue either way.
Well, it is, it just it goes back to education, like education with anything. You start younger, you give the opportunities, and that, is so true too, Tim, when it comes to our health. If you're given an opportunity to be educated about taking care of yourself, eating well, exercise, like all of those things, then you're automatically on a better trajectory.
Well, you know what is...
For the most part.
I mean, what is so frustrating to me, I guess, is that we spend so much money on treating preventative things that could be prevented from a young age.
Yeah.
And so much money is spent in a really inefficient way because we don't start preventative care for enough people at a young enough age. So it gets to the point where they end up being, it is such a big cost to the system, one that is so much bigger than preventative care.
Right. Alyssa, we talk about this all the time, like preventive care, the difference it would make in terms of the health of our population.
Tremendous. It's almost too extraordinary to quantify, although I'm sure some people can, but in Office of Management and Budget. But at the end of the day, it's a two-pronged approach. I agree with you both that it's access to healthcare and preventative medicine and access to information and the education that goes along with it. And so with COVID, we were so behind the eight ball in accepting that this was a global pandemic, in working through a major response to it, and now finally having these extraordinary pharma companies coming up with vaccines in a record timeline. Now we need to make sure we nail the logistics since we've stumbled out of the gate. And that's an infrastructure problem that involves infrastructure, transportation, as well as healthcare, which I know the president will be speaking about later today. But in terms of what we need to do, it's really fundamentally that access to education and healthcare are inextricably linked, as you say. I mean, it's a much broader discussion than just healthcare. It's about nutrition and wellness and food and and exercise and all that stuff that gives for healthy little people that can grow into healthy bigger people and hopefully healthy adults.
What is the role that of the international community working with the United States and vice versa when it comes to tackling this pandemic? Because one change that we have seen with the Biden administration is the renewing of ties between the United States and the World Health Organization. Anthony Fauci saying that the country will rejoin COVAX. That's the 92-nation collaboration that's looking to deploy vaccines around the world. That's something that the Trump administration rejected. Is that the right move for the U.S.?
Listen, I would like to think that the U.S. puts U.S. citizens first, and if Israel or anyone else had invented a vaccine before we had and it was going to be able to be mass-produced here, then by all means, why would we not use our allies to help us tackle this problem? That's just, to me, obviously good public policy, and I'm hopeful that rejoining this will send us even better in that direction, if not for this one, for the next, God forbid.
Hey, Alyssa, I do think about, what the lasting impact of this is. I mean, how could it not all be lasting in terms of how we approach life, how we approach healthcare, how we, think about society and our community. But I do wonder, do we get through this and everybody is very quick to be like, okay, I'm going to forget about COVID. And I do think about the role of companies and employees' lives. I mean, how do you see it? What do you think ultimately will be the lasting impact of COVID on things?
In terms from a perspective I have as a private equity-backed CEO, I had already had a policy of people working in the office 3 days and home 2 days prior to COVID, so I was a little ahead of the curve on that, and I certainly will have maintained that policy now that people are returning to work in safe, socially distant contexts, and would continue that going forward. I do think that creates nice work-life balance, and I also think you can in some ways increase productivity if you end up working from home 1 or 2 days a week, if it's available to you in a corporate setting. So I think that's a good thing. I don't think business travel will rebound back immediately. I think it will take a little bit of time, and I don't know if it will ever resume the exact pace that it had prior to. I think leisure travel will. I think people are jumping out of their skin to get out of their homes and their towns and to go back and see the world.
Count me in on that.
Exactly. But I think the business will be somewhat changed. I think that the piece I find most inspiring in terms of education, both in elementary from what I've seen with my children and at the graduate school level where I teach, is that I do think the digitization of some elements of education provides flexibility and enhancements that aren't necessarily available otherwise. Zooming in extraordinary guest speakers from anywhere in the world, having supplemental enrichment available to children who need extra support or who are would have otherwise been available to a gifted and talented program or anything like that. Having those extra enrichment opportunities through digital technologies is, I think, a really good thing, and I hope it continues and expect it will. If not all at home e-learning, don't get me wrong, but additional supplemental opportunities, I think, are really good that were forced through the pandemic, and I hope that they persist.
A lot of us are parents struggling with remote learning or changes to childcare over the last, it's almost been a year. But I'm wondering, as a CEO, how you've had to adapt your own policies to allow for your employees to make those changes. I mean, you mentioned you were ahead of the curve with people working remotely, but what are some of the policies that you're putting into place to allow your employees to have flexible schedules, perhaps to make sure that childcare and family care is available?
Yeah, well, it particularly impacted a couple of our executive team members, one male, one female, with infants born during the pandemic, and they would have normally been on more traditional 6 or 12-week mat or pat leave, and because of the pandemic, they have done a 6 now and going to end up being 12-month work from home. And I know in some Scandinavian countries that's more typical. That certainly wouldn't have been something I, as an employer, would have gravitated toward between us prior to the pandemic. And now that I've seen it work, I had to do the running around the world with a breast pump and an infant on planes, trains, and automobiles as a CEO once before. I don't think I would object to working parents choosing to spend 3 months or 6 months working from home with an infant versus coming back in right away. I actually think that is probably really good for family lives and very accommodating.
That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. I mean, it's really fascinating to hear that, because it's sort of this hybrid model if we think about it moving forward, right? It's not paternity leave or maternity leave. It's like working from home.
Right.
Which would obviously you still, I have a 2-year-old, so it's like you still need childcare while you're working. You're not going to be able to work with your kid there, but being home makes a big difference.
Well, and then you can be getting, childcare. My younger brother has a 1-year-old as well, is in the same boat. You can be getting childcare, family care with nanny shares or grandparents or even babysitters, et cetera, where you don't have to add in the commutes and the other risk factors to it. And I'm not suggesting that's available to all companies, but where it is available, I think it is something worth considering.
Yeah, I've heard from some, various folks that say, CEOs are going to have a reckoning. They should just kind of own it right now and just say, listen, we're going to embrace hybrid because this is what people want. You've seen it. I mean, some people can't go back to work, but there's a lot of people who don't. They are productive and they enjoy it, being at home, and it works. Alyssa, thank you, as always. A great deep dive there on all things and surrounding COVID and the coronavirus. Alyssa Rapp, she's CEO of the healthcare solutions company, Surgical Solutions, on the phone from Deerfield, Illinois. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. I love the idea of this hybrid solution and kind of thinking about, it's not a year off from work, right? It's not an extended paternity or maternity leave. It's like easing back into the office.
And think about how great that would be. And listen, we had the experiment because we didn't have a choice, and people saw it play out and work.
Yeah, guess what? People can work remotely.
Exactly. All right, lots more to get to, and we are waiting some comments from the president and I believe Anthony Fauci, so we'll take you there as soon as we have that. In the meantime, let's get another check on our trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
All right, I thank you very much. Higher across the board. Do want to begin with a story out of Washington. Democrat Allison Herron-Lee will be serving as acting chair of the SEC, while Biden administration appointee Gary Gensler awaits Senate confirmation to lead the Wall Street regulator. The advance in stocks today, we're moving higher, looking at records for the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ as I speak. Let's get right to the numbers. We'll give you the why in a moment here. S&P up 7 at 38.59, up 0.2%. The Dow's up 41, higher by 0.1%. NASDAQ is up 86, higher by 0.6%. To be clear, any advance today closing in the green will be another record for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. What about the NASDAQ 100 index, you ask? Up as well, up 0.8%. But Dow Transports lower by 1.4%. Russell 2000 slumping now by 0.6%. 10-year down 8/30 seconds. 10-year yield 1.10%. Gold down 0.2%. 18.68 the ounce. And crude West Texas Intermediate down 0.3%. 53.13 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. So it is an up day on Wall Street today. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all at records. Tech shares continue to march higher on anticipation that more fiscal spending will revive economic growth and bolster corporate earnings. As for some of the other stories that we're following today, we do have more COVID-19 news with Eli Lilly's antibody therapy reducing nursing home residents' risk of symptomatic COVID-19 by as much as 80% when used preventively in a study. Hospitals, meanwhile, are struggling to keep up with soaring virus cases. Dr. Jason Farley is deep in the trenches. He is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
We're certainly in a wave upon a wave, as has been described. Many sites, particularly in rural areas, are at capacity. We're moving patients from ICUs to medical surgical wards before they can really be fully recovered. We're moving them out of the hospital to home-based care models, again, before they have fully rehabbed. It's a dire situation in many facilities across the country.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Checking some of the vaccine names today, I mentioned Lilly. It is little change, lower now by 3 cents. Pfizer shares down by 0.4%. German partner BioNTech up by 2.9%. AstraZeneca up by 0.3%. Big surge today for Moderna, up today by 7.5%. Recapping, S&P up 8, a gain there of 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Thursday. Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We are awaiting some comments from the president. We're going to get an update on his COVID-19 strategy. We've already been talking about a lot of it and what's expected, and I think a lot of it has to do with getting more vaccines out there and logistics and distribution.
Yeah, remember those ambitious goals of 100 million in the first 100 days? And in fact, looking at Bloomberg's COVID vaccine tracker, we are actually relatively close to that number
That's what
already.
People were tweeting at me like, we're kind of there.
We're kind of there. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we see news from New York City, for example, that they don't have enough doses and have to cancel appointments. So just because we're there right now doesn't mean that we're going to stay there. As Carol mentioned, we are awaiting President Biden. He's set to deliver remarks on the COVID-19 response. He's going to be joined by Dr. Anthony Fauci and Vice President Kamala Harris as well. And also, we will be signing those executive orders and other presidential actions.
Exactly, and really just making some changes from the get-go. This is his first full day at the White House in a Biden administration. And again, you know, this is what we hear from states that have different policies. Some of them are having more success in terms of the vaccine rollout. I feel like so many conversations. We had one with a Bloomberg colleague earlier who's like, I got the vaccine and I'm signed up for my second.
And I'm like, how did you get that?
And he walked us through. And so it depends on the state and where you are in terms of whether the systems are working. But he did say he spent 2 hours on refreshing his browser to get that initial appointment.
Look, my parents are in California, and they're saying, hey, we'll drive anywhere in the state that actually has it.
Right.
It's not like, you know, the tri-state area, right, where we are, where some people live in Connecticut, some people live in New York, and some people live in New Jersey, and those have all completely different policies. One thing I'll say, Carol, we are looking at live shots of the state dining room where the president will be. We are expecting the president to be in just a few minutes. One thing sticks out to me right now, and that's that advisors close to the president are wearing masks. And also some are joining remotely. You see a screen.
We saw that at the inauguration.
Zoom. Exactly. And that's a stark contrast to what we saw throughout the Trump administration. Yes, there were at times when President Trump and people around him did wear masks, but oftentimes you'd see at these signing ceremonies people really close to the president at the height of the pandemic not wearing masks. And one thing that we saw from Biden just in the last 48 hours, right? These federal mask mandate on federal property. They can't do it in every state. That's not something they can do.
Right. It's up to the governors, right?
Exactly.
Basically.
But making it on a requirement on federal property is something they can do.
And listen, I'm going to say, and just for those watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, which you can find, just search Bloomberg Global News, you can actually see that live shot and feed Dr. Anthony Fauci there talking with a member of the Biden administration and COVID-19 response team as they're getting ready to make some comments about, or we're expected to actually hear from the president about what their strategy will be. But listen, we've heard from so many different people that even as you get the vaccine, we are going to be living in a community where you still have to do social distancing, you still have to wear masks in particular, until we get to that herd immunity point, which will require a lot of people, the majority of people getting the vaccine. So I think, we go back to, Tim, something we've talked about so much in this whole idea of community. You need to be thinking about the people around you. I mean,
what a novel concept, Carol.
I know, go figure.
Thinking about
think
the
about
people
your
around
neighbor. But we do it constantly here at work. Somebody walks up and you put your mask on because we've got plastic kind of borders around our desks at this point that allow us to take our mask off when we're sitting. But as soon as somebody comes up, you throw your mask on. You just got to be safe and secure. This is all about people. And like I said, the magazine, it's about the year ahead. we cannot start to see really our economy open until we get this virus under control.
I made reference to this yesterday, Carol, but I had a conversation with my wife over the weekend about mask wearing and saying, hey, are we going to be wearing these masks for, years to come, or is this something that goes away with the vaccine? And she made the comment, hey, this is like, this is the actual new normal. Like the vaccine's going to come, and we will likely still be wearing masks when we're on a crowded subway or when we're flying. I've traveled to all over the world, and I've been to parts of Asia where mask wearing was normal years ago, and it was the norm. It's what you would see. And it's never been something here in the United States that we've thought of as sort of being a normal part of life. And I do wonder if that is going to change this year.
Well, listen, we often say, look to China for the trends on things. I mean, we talk about individuals in China, they use their phone for everything, for buying, for, it's just become the center of their universe. We're behind on that. The virus, the pandemic, caused a lot of people to go and use their phone for a lot more things, whether it's for financial payment systems, because that's just the way we had to operate. But Asia overall has been ahead of us in terms of mask wearing, right? Like they've been wearing masks often on their trains or public transportation systems for a long time. And I do think that will easily become a part of our society as well. I do want to mention, because you and I talked about with Alyssa Rapp over at Surgical Solutions about how things need to be done on a global scale. The Biden administration is vowing tough enforcement of new safety measures. It is imposing on travelers to curb the spread of the virus. As some say, elements of the plan will be difficult to police. But I do think that if we get it under control, but Europe isn't under control, that is still going to create some slowdown in terms of economic activity and all of us getting back to normal, right? So it really has to be a global effort.
Yeah, it absolutely it has to be a global effort, and you need the buy-in too of international airlines, and that's why Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Buttigieg, who is going to be likely the Treasury Secretary, actually not Treasury Secretary, excuse me, Transportation Secretary.
Right.
He will be responsible for...
Janet Yellen's calling.
Excuse me, Tim. No.
I think that's my job.
Transportation, of course. But that will fall under his helm. I mean, he will have to do that.
Joe Biden's he's gonna require masks to be worn in airports, planes, city buses, and other forms of transportation.
And a lot of that falls under Buttigieg.
Yeah, exactly, to impose. And listen, we have all seen the videos on YouTube, the cell phone videos of people walking into a store and saying, I'm not going to wear a mask, and then it puts the onus on managers at stores and different institutions to say, well, you've got to leave or something. It makes for a very hostile environment. And this is where, one of the conversations we had is that there needs to be clear policy about what's going on so that people understand, and people understand that if you don't abide by it, you're not going to be allowed to do certain things, and there will be enforcement as a result.
I think one difficult part of the idea of federal mask guidelines, whether they're on an airplane or on federal property, is that it has become politicized in the United States. Despite what the science says about mask wearing and how it protects, it is still a political issue for many. So
it's amazing, right? How it became politicized.
And it's a real shame because they save lives, and research shows that.
It doesn't really hurt a person to do it, to throw on a mask. I'm just going to put that out. Hey, everyone, let's just remind our audience that we are awaiting comments from President Biden. He is expected to speak from the State Dining Room. Tim and I are actually, and you can find this on our YouTube channel at Bloomberg Global News, the stateroom dining room. There's a setup, there's some screens, there's some little desks, because from what I understand is people will be sitting there and they'll be socially distanced. But President Biden expected to be more specific about what his plans are when it comes to managing the virus and getting more involved, and certainly when it comes to the vaccine rollout. So as soon as he begins speaking, we will take you there live. In the meantime, let's see what's going on when it comes to world and national news overall. Here's Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Well, one of President Biden's top priorities is addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. As you said, we're waiting to hear from him in just minutes. He is apparently planning to use his top economic advisor, Brian Deese, to pitch his $1.9 trillion relief plan to a bipartisan group of lawmakers. Aides familiar with the matter say that Deese expects to speak with the group in the next week or so. Confirmation hearings continue for President Trump's cabinet nominees today. Transportation Secretary-designate Pete Buttigieg has been getting a warm bipartisan welcome from the Senate Commerce Committee. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's discussing with the House impeachment managers about when to send the article of impeachment against former President Trump to the Senate. Today, she would not give specifics, but said the trial would be starting soon. Okay, back to you, Carol and Tim.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. As we await for some comments from President Biden, we do also want to talk a little bit about the year ahead issue of the magazine.
I love the cover of this, Carol. We're going to hear more about it from Joel and Peter when they join us. But it really, and we had Joel on Quick Take earlier today. He's the editor of Bloomberg Business Week, and he talked about the idea behind the cover here. And for those who are watching us on YouTube, you can find it by searching for Bloomberg Global News. You can see it takes the approach of a supermarket tabloid, right?
Exactly.
And it's awesome because the big question that it asks is 2021 greater than 2020?
God, that just hurts to even ask. So they ask a lot of different questions. When does the new normal begin? Looking at the return of big government, and as you just mentioned, whether 2021 will be worse than 2020. So let's bring in Bloomberg Business Week economics editor Peter Coy. He writes the introduction to the year ahead issue and asks just how hard will it be to put 2020 behind us. He's on the phone in New Jersey. Also with us is Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. Joel, one thing we know for sure, there will be more vaccinations, more stimulus, more sanity. I ask with a question mark. You guys provide the guide to it all this week.
Yeah, it's an issue as you guys were just talking there that we went full tabloid with, lots of exclamation marks, lots of comments.
Joel, don't kill us. I think the president has just come out, so we're going to have to take everybody to the state dining room and get that COVID update. Let's take you to D.C. and President
Before
Biden.
I begin today's announcement, let me take a few moments to thank all the law enforcement folks for all they did, the military personnel from all across the federal, state, and local agencies that secured yesterday's inaugural activities. And a special thanks to the members of the National Guard from around the country. It was an unprecedented situation. Hope will never have to be renewed again. And everyone handled with the most professionalism and duty and honor that you could be expected. The president, as commander-in-chief, I always respect and revere their service and that of their families. But now to today's announcement. Vice President Harris and I were joined by members of our COVID-19 response team, Dr. Tony Fauci, our Chief COVID Medical Advisor, Javier Becerra, our nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Vivek Murthy, our nominee for Surgeon General, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, she's going to be the Director for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and Dr. Marcelo Nunez-Smith, who will be leading our equity work and the COVID response, and Jeff Zients and Natalie Quillen, who are managing this whole effort. Yesterday, during my inaugural address, I offered a salient prayer and a silent prayer. It was both salient and silent. I thought it was important that people understand what had happened, that we all pay tribute to our prayers for those 400,000 Americans who've lost their lives in this pandemic. On Tuesday, Jill and I, Kamal and Doug, we stood at the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial and joined Americans all across the country to remember those 400,000 moms and dads, husbands and wives, children, sons, daughters. And I said at that moment that to heal, we must remember. To heal, we must remember. It's important to do that as a nation. We must also act, though, not just remember. Yet for the past year, we couldn't rely on the federal government to act with the urgency and focus and coordination we needed. And we have seen the tragic cost of that failure. 3,000 to 4,000 deaths per day. To date, more than 24 million Americans, 24 million Americans have been infected. To put that in context, America makes up 4% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's confirmed COVID-19 cases and only 20% of all the COVID-19 deaths, when we have 4% of the world's population. The pandemic, has disproportionately impacted on blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, who are about 4 times as likely to be hospitalized and nearly 3 times more likely to die from the COVID-19 pandemic than white Americans. Hospitals are out of beds. Businesses are closed for good. Schools are caught in between. And while the vaccines provide so much hope, the rollout has been a dismal failure thus far. So, I understand the despair and frustration of so many Americans and how they're feeling. I understand why many governors, mayors, county officials, tribal leaders feel like they're left on their own without a clear national plan to get them through the crisis. Let me be very clear. Things are going to continue to get worse before they get better. The memorial we held 2 nights ago will not be our last one, unfortunately. The death toll will likely top 500,000 next month. The cases will continue to mount. We didn't get into this mess overnight. It's going to take months for us to turn things around. But let me be equally clear. We will get through this. We will defeat this pandemic. And to a nation waiting for action, let me be the clearest on this point. Help is on the way. Today, I am unveiling a national strategy on COVID-19 and executive actions to beat this pandemic. This plan reflects the ideas I set forward during the campaign and further refined over the past 3 months. It consists of my transitions teams, the task force, Tony Fauci and the team here today and other experts put this plan together. Our national strategy is comprehensive. It's based on science, not politics. It's based on truth, not denial, and it's detailed. You can review this entire plan by going to whitehouse.gov. It is so detailed, it is over 198 pages in complete detail what we're going to do. Our plan starts with mounting an aggressive, safe, and effective vaccination campaign to meet our goal of administering 100 million shots in our first 100 days in office. We're on day 1. This will be one of the greatest operational challenges our nation has ever undertaken. And I'm committed to getting it done. We're committed to getting it done. And as I explained last week, we'll move heaven and earth to get more people vaccinated for free and create more places for them to get vaccinated, to mobilize more medical teams to get shots in people's arms, and to increase vaccine supply and get it out the door as fast as possible. Yesterday, we got started. We directed the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to start standing up the first federally supported community vaccination centers with the goal of standing up 100 centers within the next month. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will launch the federal pharmacy program to make vaccines available to communities in their local pharmacies, beginning early I think it's by the 7th or 8th of February, but in very early February. We'll also task the Department of Health and Human Services to prepare and expand the pool of medical professionals who can administer the vaccine, and to ensure we have enough vaccinators, the people doing the vaccines, to meet the nation's needs, and quickly. In addition to this effort, our administration will be asking Congress to fund for the funds to grow the public health workforce. We also are going to take immediate steps to partner with governors, mayors, and other local officials who we've been talking to all along, who are on the front lines of this fight. We directed FEMA to establish a COVID response liaison for each state, which means every state will have a point person at the federal level to maximize cooperation between the federal government and the states. And where it falls short, to be made known about it, may be made known immediately. This is a model we used to respond to Hurricane Sandy, which I was deeply involved with. And in just a few moments, I'm going to sign a declaration to immediately begin reimbursing states 100% for the use of their National Guards to help COVID relief efforts, something Democrats and Republican governors alike have called for. But the brutal truth is, it's going to take months before we can get the majority of Americans vaccinated. So, while we increase vaccinations, we're going to take steps necessary now to slow the spread of the disease as well. One of our 100-day challenges is asking the American people to mask up for the first 100 days, the next 99 days. The masks have become a partisan issue, unfortunately, but it's a patriotic act. But for a few months to wear a mask, no vaccines, the fact is that they're the single best thing we can do. They're even more important than the vaccines because they take time to work. And if we do this as Americans, the experts say by wearing a mask from now until April, we'd save more than 50,000 lives going forward, 50,000 lives. So I'm asking every American to mask up for the next 100 days. Yesterday, I signed an executive action that requires masks and social distancing on federal property. Today, we'll be signing an additional executive action to extend masking requirements on interstate travel, like on trains, planes, and buses. And in light of the new COVID variants that you're learning about, we are instituting now a new measure for individuals flying into the United States from other countries. In addition to wearing masks, everyone flying to the United States from another country will need to test before they get on that plane, before they depart, and quarantine when they arrive in America. Our national plan launches a full-scale wartime effort to address the supply shortages by ramping up production and protective equipment, syringes, needles, you name it. And when I say wartime, people kind of look at me like, wartime? Well, as I said last night, 400,000 Americans have died. That's more than have died in all of World War II. 400,000. And this is a wartime undertaking. Today, I'm signing an executive action to use the Defense Production Act and all other available authorities to direct all federal agencies and private industry to accelerate the making of everything that's needed to protect, test, vaccinate, and take care of our people. Well, we've already identified suppliers, and we're working with them to move the plan forward. Now, look, our strategy includes a plan to safely reopen schools and businesses while protecting our workers. Today, we're directing the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services to immediately provide schools and communities with clear guidance and resources to safely reopen the schools and child care centers. We're putting, and by the way, when you do that, think of all the people who can get back to work, be able to get back to work, all the mothers and single fathers who are staying home, taking care of their children. We're going to put the full force of the federal government behind expanding testing by launching a COVID-19 pandemic testing board. This effort will ensure that we get testing to where it is needed and where it's needed most, helping schools and businesses reopen safely and protecting the most vulnerable, like those who live in long-term care facilities. And for the millions of workers, many of whom are people of color, immigrants and low-wage workers, who continue to put their lives on the line to keep this country going through the pandemic, I'm calling for the enforcement of a more stringent worker safety standards so that you are better protected from this virus while you have to continue to work to protect the rest of us. Our plan also protects those most at risk and works for everyone of all races and in urban and rural communities alike. Today, I'm formalizing the Health Equity Task Force that we announced in the transition, led by the brilliant Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith, who ensures that it's going to ensure that equality is at the core of every decision we make. That includes addressing vaccine hesitancy and building trust in communities, as well as fighting disinformation campaigns that are already underway. Above all, our plan is to restore public trust. We will make sure that scientists and public health experts will speak directly to you. That's why you're going to be hearing a lot more from Dr. Fauci again. Not from the president, but from the real, genuine experts and scientists. We're going to make sure they work free from political interference and they make decisions strictly based on science and healthcare alone. Science and health alone, not what the political consequences are. The Vice President Harris and I and our entire administration will always be honest and transparent with you about both the good news and the bad. We will level with you when we make a mistake. We'll straight up say what happened. And I said at the outset, the honest truth is we're still in a dark winter of this pandemic. It's going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to take many months to get where we need to be. Progress from our plan will take time to measure as people getting infected today, they don't show up as in case counts for weeks. And those who perish from this disease die weeks after their exposure. Despite the best intentions, we're going to face setbacks, which I will always explain to you. But I also know we can do this if we come together. That's why, ultimately, our plan is based on unity and all of us acting as one nation. It requires families and neighbors looking out for one another, healthcare providers, and business and civic and religious and civil rights organizations, and unions, all relying together on a common purpose with urgency and purpose and resolve. It requires reasserting our global leadership, which is why I took an action yesterday for the United States to rejoin the World Health Organization and to reestablish our global pandemic office in the National Security Council. It requires Congress coming together to provide the necessary funding in the COVID relief package and the American Rescue Plan that I will soon be sending to the Congress. I know these bold, practical steps will not come cheaply, but failing to do so will cost us so much more dearly. I look forward to working with members of both parties in the Congress. We're in a national emergency, and it's time we treat it like one, together with a national plan as the United States of America. As I said yesterday in my inaugural address, there are moments in history when more is asked of a particular generation, more of asked of us as Americans than other times. We are in that moment now. History is going to measure whether we're up to the task. I believe we are. The American people have given so much already, but I believe they're ready to set big goals and pursue them with courage, conviction, and honesty, because the health of the nation is literally at stake. It's not hyperbole. I'm convinced the American people are ready as well to spare no effort, no expense to get this done. What could be more important? The more people we vaccinate and the faster we do it, the sooner we can put this pandemic behind us. And the sooner we can build our economy back and build it back better and get back to our lives and to our loved ones. We can do this. We can do this if we stand together as fellow Americans, as the United States of America. So God bless those lost souls in this pandemic and their families, all they left behind. And may God bless all of you on the front lines who define the best of who we are as Americans. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to this desk and sign these executive actions. But again, this is the plan. This is the plan. You can go online and get it. I know it's a lot of heavy reading, but it's all laid out in stark detail here. Thank you. This executive order I'm signing is strengthening the supply chain. This next one is keeping workers safe. How to do that. This next one is ensuring equitable response. take these out this way. The pens are going to pop on me. Can you give me a hand here? There you go. This next one is what I referenced about traveling in America. This is the promoting safe travel. This next one is setting up the pandemic testing board. Thank you. This next one is studying safe schools initiative.
All right, so that is President Biden currently live in the state dining room, and he is signing, we've kind of lost count, but it looks like it's going to be maybe close to 10, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, executive orders dealing specifically with COVID-19 and the coronavirus and the plans that he's putting in place, including an executive order on airport mask wearing, air travel tests, travel back and forth between states. So he's really laying out all of these rules that he will put into effect as he signs these executive orders.
School safety, recording COVID data, supply chains, keeping workers safe, an equitable response. Carol, watching the president speak just now, I was struck by a couple things. One is the way that he talked about the more than 400,000 Americans who have died as a result of this pandemic. And that is something we heard from him 2 nights ago at a memorial. The other part of this, too, is the way that he's managing expectations for Americans. He's saying that we didn't get into this mess overnight and that it's going to take quite a while to get out of it, saying that another 100,000 people could die by the time we are on the other side of this pandemic. He seems to be being direct about this rather than saying, you know, we're rounding the corner, for example.
Right, really laying down numbers. I want to take us back to Washington because he's answering some questions.
That's a good start. 100 million. Thank you.
All right, so he's being ushered out rather quickly. President Biden pretty succinct there, but laying out, I was counting at least 6 or 7 executive orders, reimbursing states for the National Guard, increasing cooperation with states, CDC starting a program to get doses to pharmacies. His plan calls for 100 million shots over 100 days. National strategy, it's 198 pages long, but also, again, dealing with supply chains and executive orders. So all of these being put into place. He did say it's in a national emergency that we are in, and he is laying out a national plan, which is something that I think many people have called for in terms of really getting ourselves around the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We've got lots more to come, but let's do a quick check on your trading day. We've seen stocks rally again, bouncing off their lows. Charlie, where are we?
We are higher across the board with 51 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Do want to begin with a developing story headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. Parler is losing a request for an injunction against Amazon. The Parler judge refusing to make Amazon restore the site's web hosting. Amazon, you recall, pulled the plug on Parler's web hosting service over concern that the conservative alternative to Twitter was brimming with violent content. Tech shares continue to push higher in anticipation that more fiscal spending will revive economic growth and bolster corporate earnings. S&P 500 index up 8 now at a record, up 0.2%. NASDAQ up 91, up 0.7%. NASDAQ 100 index up 0.9%. Dow Transports down 1.5%. Russell 2000 lower now by 0.6%. The Dow average also at a record, up 49 points, up just about 0.2%. 10-year yield 1.10%. Gold down 0.2%. 18.68 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.4%. 53.08 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Got it, Charlie. Thank you so much for the update. As we said earlier, it's the year ahead issue, asking questions about when does the new normal begin, looking at the return of big government, and whether 2021 will be worse than 2020. You know, Tim, earlier you talked about the cover, and it's just a lot of things that are going on.
Yeah, I love it. Joel joined us on Quick Take earlier today and said they went full tabloid on the cover, and it's one of my favorites.
It's a favorite issue of mine every year. Joel is with us, Bloomberg Businessweek editor Joel Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. So too is Bloomberg Businessweek economics editor Peter Coy, who writes the introduction to the issue and asks just how hard it will be to put 2020 behind us. And man, Joel, we cannot wait to put this year behind us, but I'm a little nervous about what's in store this year.
Well, that's why we tried to be slightly lighthearted and go with this tabloid look, which really just started with us asking a bunch of questions. And as we kept asking questions, I kept adding exclamation marks. I think the big debate on the staff is whether 2021 is the year of the exclamation mark or the year of the question mark. Right now, it feels more like the latter, just tons of questions. And as we started asking those questions, though, we did, I mean, the tabloid thing is fun, but we take this very seriously, and we tried to just pack it full of as much useful information as we can. That's where Peter came in with the intro, obviously. And, you know, I think the real takeaway, Peter, is, you know, our economic outlook is basically wedded to the number of vaccinations that the U.S. is able to do, and that goes for the rest of the world as well. So what does that outlook sort of look like from your reporting?
If you look at the GDP forecasts for the world and the U.S. and many other countries, they look pretty good. You would think, wow, nice, that's healthy growth. For example, for the world, 5.1%, for the U.S., 3.5%. But you have to keep in mind that that's off a very low base. So what's happened is that 2020 was an awful year, and we're getting a rebound. So it looks good, but we're not even rebounding all the way back to the trajectory we were on. You know, it's like I don't know, maybe I'm just the glass is half empty kind of guy, but I'm not super happy about this.
Oh, come on.
Maybe
Okay, well, is there any good news? Did you find anything to be optimistic about in your reporting?
No, I mean, the obvious thing is that the vaccines were developed far faster than, a lot of scientists have been expecting. That's a huge positive. It is taking a while to get them distributed, but the U.S. is actually, even though if you're living in the U.S., it feels kind of slow, the U.S. has done a higher percentage of its population getting vaccines than most other countries. And I do believe that we're going to get our act together eventually, and that this will end up being the year when the tide really does turn on the vaccine. The second half is going to look better than the first half.
So it also looks different elsewhere in the world, Peter. And one place that it looks completely different is China, which, even though they haven't really done mass vaccinations yet, the economy remains to, it didn't skip a beat last year. Only major economy that didn't have a contraction, and right. Here we are projecting that they will become the world's largest economy in just a couple more years. What from an economist standpoint, just how legit are those Chinese numbers?
You never know whether to trust any given year, but it's certainly true that relatively speaking, they did better than the rest of the world. I mean, that's just obvious, just walking around the streets of Beijing or Shanghai, that people are going to restaurants, they're going to theaters, kids are going to school just as normal, people are going to work just as normal, traveling. That's just evidence that they've got the virus under control through, blocking and tackling, doing the basics right. So they had, as Joel said, positive growth last year, and they expected to have a strong growth this year.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Joel, please.
Oh, I was just going to ask, when you look in your intro, you had a couple other countries that stood out to you. What are the other ones that you feel are going to, be ones that we'll continue to talk about this year?
Well, the UK had a terrible 2020. They did much worse than the U.S. The U.S. probably had about a 3.6% decline in GDP. UK, over 10% decline in GDP. So Boris Johnson has his hands full trying to fix that, and now looking good so far in 2021 with more lockdowns to try to suppress the virus. Germany has done somewhat better. Germany has a bad habit of exporting its way out of its problems, building up huge trade surpluses that other countries resent, and that looks like that's going to continue in 2021.
You know, Peter, what's interesting too, as you say, as with workers, so with companies, some businesses are never coming back because COVID has permanently changed the way we do things. And that is so true the case. Yes. And it does raise the question of like, what should governments be propping up? Are they going to be propping up businesses that maybe if COVID hadn't come along, maybe they would have gone away in a couple of years or in a year versus,
so the argument there would be, we want to protect people. And there's ways to protect people without necessarily protecting the companies they work for. If a company does have a good chance of succeeding in the new environment, it makes sense to keep it alive. If its business model is fundamentally flawed because of the changes caused by COVID, then maybe it's better to let it go.
What about developing countries? We talked a lot about developed countries, but I know you have some information in your most recent article about Brazil and some African nations.
Yeah, so Brazil's getting COVID vaccines from China. Africa has a big problem in that it's just not getting the vaccines. It's sort of unconscionable the way the rich countries of the world are hogging most of the vaccines for themselves, when in some ways the developing world is more vulnerable, more susceptible to the virus.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. It's a great read, and it really sets up the whole issue, the year ahead issue of Bloomberg Business Week magazine. Thank you so much. Bloomberg Business Week economics editor Peter Coy writing the introduction in this week's issue, which is online on the Bloomberg and on newsstands right now. And of course, our thanks to Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access Line in Brooklyn. In fact, there's another part of the magazine. It's about the 50 companies to watch. We're going to actually talk to one of them a little bit later on our broadcast. We're going to talk with the CEO and co-founder of Twilio. In the meantime, we want to get to a guest that unfortunately got cut short yesterday on Inauguration Day, and so delighted that he could join us again. I said yesterday, he's an award-winning journalist. He was a communications consultant, worked for both of Barack Obama's presidential campaign. He has taught as a guest speaker at Stanford, NYU, digital media producer who has worked with David Bowie, Britney Spears, many others. Spencer Critchley is managing partner at the marketing agency Boots Road Group. His book out this year, Patriots of Two Nations, Why Trump Was Inevitable and What Happens Next. I'm rushing because I want to get to him. Spencer is back with us from Monterey, California. Thank you so much for coming back. I know with all the news that's been breaking, we've been bouncing around a lot. You know, we talked yesterday about division and kind of where we are, and I do want to look forward a little bit, Spencer, and how you see it, and you know how you see Mitch McConnell, who has been so key also in creating division. Nancy Pelosi has created division.